What's up, beautiful people? Listen, Dharma, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be checking this video from Dr. Sowell, and it's titled Facts About Civilization You Don't Hear in Schools. Woohoo! Interesting. I've heard lots of people talk about colonization, civilization and everything, and they always want to share some interesting facts or interesting stories about it. But yeah, I'm excited to check this one out to hear from Sowell. I've learned a lot from Sowell myself, and I always encourage people to learn from Dr. Sowell because he's a national treasure, and lots of the time people don't share some aspect or some part of history, and Dr. Sowell have done justice to that, to sharing the right knowledge about history. So yeah, I'm excited to check this one out to hear what Sowell have got to say. Let's check it out.
At one time, it was fashionable to glorify conquest. But in fact, we've become much more aware of the oppressions and the atrocities that go along with it. Conquest in cultures begins with a quote from John Stuart Mill that conquerors almost universally treat the conquered people, in his words, as mere dirt under their feet, unquote. And this raises the question of what is the net balance of good and bad in conquest. And this book explicitly repudiates any attempt to make any such balance. All we can say today is that we can try to understand what happened and what were the causes and what were the consequences. Now, that doesn't make the history of conquest sort of an antiseptic academic exercise, because it has serious implications for some of the major issues of our times. Again, the central theme of these great disparities in wealth, I think, are illuminated by some of the histories of conquest, as well as the history of migrations in the previous volume. Many people seem to think that these disparities are something remarkable. In discussing the Indonesian crisis, many people have said the Chinese are only 5% of the population of Indonesia, and they own 80% of the capital of the country. As if that's astonishing or presumably sinister. In point of fact, such situations have not been rare at all. In 19th century Russia, Germans were 1% of the population of the country.
Wow.
They were 40% of the Russian military high command. They were more than half of the officials in the Russian foreign ministry. In Britain, for a period of about 100 years, when the scholars have gone back through the diplomatic correspondence, they have found that the diplomatic correspondence of the Russians was written in German. The Germans were also the vast majority of all the members of the St. Petersburg Academy of Sciences. Moreover, these were Baltic Germans, who were themselves a minority within the 1% minority of Germans in Russia. They were not nearly as numerous as the Black Sea Germans or the Volga Germans.
Wow.
In 20th century Brazil, in the early period, in Rio Grande do Sul, 100% of whole industries were German-owned. These included the manufacture of trunks, stoves, hats, paper, soap, glasses, matches, beer, of course, leather, and neckties. Jews have never been as much as 1% of the population of Australia. Yet at one time, they owned most of the clothing stores in Melbourne. In Poland, between the two world wars, Jews were just 11% of the population, but they were more than half of all the physicians, and conducted more than two-thirds of the commerce of the country. They were also 3/5 of all the physicians in Hungary, where they were just 6% of the population.
Before we go on, you see the good thing about history. I always encourage and say people learn the entirety of history. People say, oh, is one side or the other side, or one side hurts the most or hurts them the most. But I always say that regardless of how you want to see it, in history, everybody offended everybody, one way or the other. People will share only one side and say, yeah, it was this side's fault. But don't forget that while this side is hurting this person, this other person is also hurting somebody. So it's just going round. It's a messy go-round thing. So it's always moving in circles. It is not just one person, but lots of people that did all of this and hurt people. and they breed it to a continuous circle. That's why I always encourage people to learn the entirety of it, not a portion size, because lots of people, they only move with the knowledge that it is just one person's fault or it's just one group of people's fault. And they don't want to look at it in all fairness and see things or call things for what it is. But I mean, you can hear it for yourself. It went round. But this is interesting. Let's go on.
Population. People from India so predominated in the commerce of East Africa in colonial times that the rupee became the standard currency in much of East Africa. At the peak of their population size in Uganda, before the mass expulsions by Idi Amin, Indians, Pakistanis, and Goans put together added up to barely 1% of the population.
1%?
Yet they owned at one time 80% of the capital of the country, including 90% of its cotton gins. It would be possible to go around the world and back through history, citing similar groups and gross disparities involving the Japanese immigrants in southern Brazil, the Parsis in India, the Lebanese in West Africa, the Italians in Argentina, the Greeks in the Ottoman Empire, or the Igbos in northern Nigeria, among others. Here in the United States, you need only turn on a television set to see gross racial disproportionality in professional basketball. And if you pay attention to the beer companies that sponsor this and other sports event, you will discover that these beer companies were created almost exclusively by Americans of German ancestry. So despite what is assumed in the media, in the politics, and in courts of law, gross statistical disparities are the rule, not the exception, in countries around the world, and they have been for centuries. That still leaves the question as to why there are such huge disparities. It's amazing how many of the people who find these disparities both offensive and puzzling never look at the disparities in inputs behind the disparities in outputs. For example, back when admissions to the universities in Sri Lanka was by examination rather than by racial quotas, as they later became, members of the Tamil minority scored more than half of all the A's on their mathematical examinations, rather than the Sinhalese majority. During the heyday of British industrialization, 40% of all the patents in the world were held by people from Britain.
Wow.
In the late 19th century, just 3 countries produced over half the manufactured goods in the world: Britain, Germany, and the United States. And that was to remain that way for several decades. It's recently been estimated that 17% of the people in the world produce 80% of its output. Nor are these always differences between biologically different people. It was estimated a few years ago that the 36 million overseas Chinese produced as much wealth as the 1 billion people in China itself. That's probably changed now that China has Hong Kong. When people talk about very internal versus external causes of these kinds of disparities, they often talk in needlessly narrow terms. When they talk about nature versus nurture or heredity versus environment, nature is almost invariably taken to mean genes. In all 3 of the books in this series, nature also includes geography. And geography has an enormous impact, not just in the obvious ways of having gold deposits in some countries and not in others, oil deposits in some other places, fertile soil some places and not other places, and so on. I argue throughout the 3 books that the most profound effect of geography is on people, and in particular on their contacts, how wide their contacts are with the range of other people in the world.
God bless you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Thomas Sowell, for sharing your knowledge right across to the world or to the society. Now you understand why some side of history or some part of history are not being told, because they don't want you to know the truth. They don't want you to see the truth, and they don't want you to know some details of some things. I've said it before, not everything about history was nice. The exact same thing, there were some good, there were some bad things, but at the same time, people always want to dwell on the negative sides and some sort of way create some victimhood, guilt-tripping and whatnot, and make some other people look bad and make that some other people were the victims here, when in real sense, if you look at it, everybody offend everybody. While also some group of people came together for the betterment of some things, and people should look at it in all fairness. And I've said it before people want to start pointing fingers, remember that those same fingers are pointing right back at you. We should learn the entirety of history, take it for what it is, and make sure it doesn't repeat itself again, and move on, learn from the past. But this is interesting. I've said it before, people keep saying civilization was a bad thing, colonization was a bad thing that happened to many nations, but at the same time, have you also seen or looked at the positive side or the positive effect of it? But no, they don't want you to see that. They want you to always think it is someone else's fault, when in real sense, everybody in the history, either way you look at it, offended one person or the other, and that is just how it is. And that is, I guess that is what they want to continuously do, to create a side that is going to be guilt-tripped or seen as the guilty ones, and create a side that is going to see themselves as the victims. So now it's left for you to either see which side you're going to belong, because to them there is nothing like liberty. That's why they're trying to shove off history, and that's why sometimes they are also trying to hide history, saying history should not be taught in schools no more, because they don't want you to know this. They want you to know what they want you to know. They want to control you, so they teach you what they want you to know, not what you need to know, because they know if you know the entirety of it, you will be free. But they want to control your mind, and that's how things are. But again, I always say when people want to learn history, they should learn the entirety of it. Also, study from people like Dr. Sowell. I've learned a lot from him, and I'm still learning, and I don't see myself stop learning anything or things about history anytime soon, because it's gonna help you in life. But again, this is interesting, and I bet this video speaks for itself. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comment down below. I'm sure tons of people have interesting things to share. I would really love you to share that. You can share the useful information you think might be really helpful. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe and all of that stuff. And until next time, see you in the next video.